In this episode, I'm going to break down the core patterns that get in the way of you finishing things, what's the neuroscience behind it is, the difference between macro finishing and micro finishing, and a 7-step plan completion system to support you to finish things more effectively. Do you struggle with finishing projects? Do you start multiple things at the same time and never get around to finishing core projects? You're not lacking intelligence, you're not broken in any way. It simply means that you don't have a completion system that can support you to finish things in a successful way. If you're new here, my name is Katie Stoddard. I work as a high performance coach and speaker for overthinkers and ADHD business owners. And if you're curious, there's a totally free newsletter that I send every 2 weeks called Friday Focus, and there's a link in the comments below. And I share in this newsletter core tips, tools, ideas, books to support you to have high levels of performance, but also inner peace in your personal life. What is the core pattern that happens that gets in the way of you completing and finishing things? It begins with an excitement spike. You have a new idea. Someone tells you about this great project. You read somewhere something interesting and you decide that this is something of relevance. So you get really excited about it and there's a high rise in interest. After this happens, there's an obsession phase. Maybe for a few weeks, you'll obsess about it. So perhaps you'll read a lot about the topic or you'll start doing it for several hours a day and you'll get very excited about it. I know that I experienced this with multiple hobbies and multiple projects, also in my business, where I get this huge spike of excitement and then I obsess over it for a few weeks. But then what happens? Then there's a boredom dip. The excitement drops, you start to feel less enthusiastic about it, and following the boredom dip, resistance starts to build up. This is when you realize that maybe you don't want to actually do this so much, and that initial excitement sort of faded away. Maybe you're a bit surprised by this, or maybe you're used to it because you've noticed this before, and you start to feel resistant. Then what happens? New shiny idea, new project, and you start this new project and then you feel guilty for the lack of progress you've made or for not finishing the previous projects, and then this cycle repeats. So if you're familiar with this cycle, we're going to break down here how you can complete different projects and not continuously do these loops in multiple projects, whether it's in your business or in your personal life. When we're looking at the neuroscience here behind why it's hard to complete things, if you're somewhat on the ADHD spectrum, but maybe even if you're not, you're wired in a way where the brain is wired to be interest-based. So instead of having a lot of focus and attention on things that are important or urgent, it's what interests you that really gives you that spike. And as soon as the novelty drops, there is less dopamine. So you get a dopamine spike associated with novelty. And ADHD brains generally have less dopamine, so they're always seeking activities or things that can give them that dopamine boost. So when the novelty drops, there's less dopamine, and then you don't want to do the activity anymore. There's another reason you might be struggling to complete things, which is unrelated to ADHD, and this is fear of completion. Many of us struggle with fear of completion, and the reason for this is that we believe that if we finish a project, something that we're working on, then failure becomes a higher possibility, because until you finished it, it's a work in progress. And therefore it can't be categorized as a success or failure. So behind this fear of completion, there's a fear of rejection or fear of failure. And this can really also block you from finishing things, because you can maintain the illusion of progress, maintain the illusion of working on something until it's finished. So that's something to be very mindful and aware of that can also hold you back in terms of making progress and finishing projects that are important in your life. When we look at finishing things, there are 2 scales on which this happens. There's both macro finishing and micro finishing. Macro are for bigger projects of several weeks, several months. Maybe it's a new business idea, maybe it's writing a book, maybe it's playing 3-4 new pieces on the piano if you play the piano as an instrument. Maybe it's running that marathon or preparing for a marathon. These are macro projects because you can't do them within a couple of hours or within a couple of days. These are projects that take several weeks or several months. This is macro finishing, and the system I'm going to be explaining of 7 steps can support you with macro finishing, but also micro finishing. And micro finishing a smaller task. It could be finishing that article in that 1 hour. It could be finishing folding the laundry. It could be finishing cleaning the household. It's finishing those activities within an hour, within 2 hours. And what's very common when we struggle with finishing things is it happens both on a macro level, where there are big projects that we drop halfway because we lose interest and the novelty has dropped. But it can also happen on a micro level where you're 90% done writing the article and then you'll just switch and do something else. And when this happens, you get more frustration and you also get more mental overload and overwhelm because there's all these unfinished windows in the back of your mind. So we want to work both at the same time on finishing things on a macro level, these macro projects you're working on, but also on a micro level, individual tasks. Okay, so let's explore the 7-step plan that can help you to complete and to finish things both on a macro level and on a micro level. The first idea is the parking lot, the idea parking lot. If you have a brain that's highly stimulated with a lot of new ideas, what can happen is a new idea can steal the show of a previous idea or project you're working on. If you have a place to store all your new ideas, this can prevent you on the moment from leaping into this new idea at the cost of current projects you're working on. So you might want to use something like Notion or many other tools that are similar to Notion to help you to have a backlog of all the different ideas, parking lot of all the different ideas that you're working on that come to your mind or that are something that interests you and spike your interest. What might also happen when you do this is you realize that certain ideas, they excite you for a day or two, and a week later you've lost total interest. So instead of leaping in and wasting your precious energy, time, effort, having this parking lot also helps you to filter out over time the ones that remain interesting for you. The second point here is to then, once you have decided and when you are working on an idea that's important for you, to have a 30-day commitment. Once you embark on that journey, that project, that idea, when you're in that excitement phase and that obsession phase, decide, okay, I have 30 days and I will commit to doing this activity during these 30 days. It's quite similar to a concept that we discussed in Tiny Experiments. I filmed an episode on tiny experiments based on the book Tiny Experiments by Anne-Laure Lecomte. And in this book, she explains that somewhere in between a habit and a goal, there is a tiny experiment. The habit is something you do forever. The goal is generally long-term ambition and dream, but the tiny experiment is something in between. So in terms of a timeline, it's quite interesting to use a month for interest and just try something out for a month and see how you feel. So that's the second phase, which is similar once more to this idea of tiny experiment. Now, while you're working on this and you've committed doing this activity or task or habit each day, you want to keep up that excitement. And for this is step 3. You can either use something called dopamine pairing, which is explained in Atomic Habits by James Clear, where the idea is as you're doing the task, if you're finding it a bit more boring, you can at the same time listen to an audiobook or put some music on. I often use music while I work to keep me energized while I'm working on it. And then step 4 is novelty boosting. So if dopamine pairing doesn't work, let's say for instance you're learning to play a new piece of piano, you can't really do something else exciting at the same time to keep you excited. So you can't really do dopamine pairing, but what you can do is novelty boosting. Novelty boosting is finding novelty within the same activity, seeing how this is different. If we look, for instance, at recording the podcast or YouTube, I've done hundreds of videos, and as someone who really loves novelty and who does struggle to continue projects and finish things, the way I managed was by thinking and seeing each episode as something new. Even though it's the same type of activity, it's a new topic, it's a new way of talking about it, some new research around it, and this provides me with the novelty and the dopamine that I need to continue filming 100 more episodes on different topics. So finding novelty. So that was step 4. Step 5 is to have public stakes. Having some form of accountability, external pressure can support you to stay on track. Very often, if we're left to our own devices, it's a lot harder than if we have some form of accountability externally, and this can support us. It can be a pledge that you do in your social media that you'll do this for 30 days. It can be having an accountability partner. It can be working with a coach. Whatever method you choose is having some way of having this high level of commitment, but also externally, so public stakes. Step number 6 is to have a boredom dip plan. Anticipate and know in advance that there will be a phase where you feel bored, where you no longer feel excited, and have a plan what you will do about it. A few ideas here. Shrink the task, make it smaller. For instance, if you're working on that new book and you decided to write a chapter a week, make it a page a week. Maybe make it a paragraph a week. Shrink it on the moment until you regain the momentum, and then you can make it bigger again. Change the environment. Very often working from a different place, working in a different way can really stimulate us and make us excited again, even if it's the same type of activity. So changing the environment can really support you to find that novelty and to continue and keep up that momentum. Gamify it. Find some way of gamifying the work that you're working on, the different projects that you're invested in. And when you gamify it, this makes it so much easier to find joy in the process and to keep going. And step number 7 is to celebrate the progress. As you're progressing on it, when it's week 1, week 2, week 3, celebrate how far you've come. Don't take it for granted and see how wonderful it is to progress on something, and celebrate the end of milestones. So in the example of writing a book is a big project. Each time you finish a chapter, you could really celebrate finishing that chapter and see it as a mini completion. So these were the 7 steps that can support you in reaching that goal of finishing any activity you're working on. And this plan was more on a macro level, but you can use it on a micro level in the sense that you can use some form of accountability to finish a task. You can use dopamine pairing, novelty boosting, all these things to finish things in one slot, in that 1 hour or in the 2 hours that you use. One of the tools I like to use a lot is Parkinson law, where you set yourself a fixed deadline, timeline to finish something, and this supports you to keep that momentum and to finish things within time. Why does it matter to finish things? If you are interested in having high levels of performance, but also inner peace, then you know that having a bunch of things unfinished leads to mental clutter, overwhelm, and also lower self-esteem and self-trust. When you build the habit of finishing things more often, regularly, even if it's 80% of the time, but it's more frequent, then you feel more satisfied, more self-trust, more enjoyment, more contentment, and it's a lot easier to lead your life and your business on a way where you can trust yourself to deliver on the outputs and to actually finish things off. And it's a lot more satisfying also. Something that happens when you get into the habit of finishing things more frequently is you build an identity of someone who finished things. You know, when you start something, I will finish that. I always finish things within the time frame I tell myself. I always finish things on time. I always finish the projects I start. And this becomes part of your identity. And as we know, when you have an identity shift, it makes it a lot easier to follow through in terms of behaviors and actions. One last tool that can support you. If you're feeling inspired to finish things, go on a finish sprint. Take 2-3 things in your life and business right now that are 90% completed. Could even be a book that you're reading and maybe you've got 1 chapter left. But just the small things, 2-3 things you're almost finished with, and give yourself a week to finish these 3 things. This will give you easy wins. It will help you to shift your identity so you have more self-belief that you can finish things off. It'll give you a boost and show you that it can be done. And then you can apply this completion system to support you to finish things more effectively and more frequently. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please let me know in the comments any questions, any ideas that come to your mind regarding this, and what has helped you to finish things more effectively before. If you're new, please subscribe, like the video, and if you're curious about working one-on-one with me or collaborating, you can fill in the form below to get in touch. Thank you so much for tuning in, and see you in the next episode.